Good morning and welcome to the Rainbow Push Coalition Saturday Morning Forum. My name is Clayton Harris III, and I'm going to be moderating our conversation this morning with attorney Ashanta Rice and TO Mr. Ceasefire Hardiman. First, we're going to start off with current events. President Joe Biden has recently called for significant reforms in the United States Supreme Court, advocating for term limits. This proposal has garnered support from a broad spectrum of voters, with 67% of the American public, including 82% of Democrats and 57% of Republicans, in favor of implementing term limits. However, President Biden did stop short of endorsing the more radical idea of expanding the number of justices on the court, a measure supported by some progressive Democrats to counterbalance the current conservative Supreme Court majority. Additionally, though, President Biden has criticized the Supreme Court's recent rulings that grant former President Trump broad immunity from his official acts, calling it a decision that undermines the rule of law. This ruling has sparked outrage among Democrats and legal analysts who argue it sets a dangerous precedent for presidential accountability. These proposed changes and Biden's statements reflect a growing concern over the court's decisions and its perceived partisanship, as well as ongoing scrutiny over the scandals involving some of the justices and their ethics. In addition to this and what President Biden has brought forward, we are still focusing on the case dealing with Sonya Massey. Sonya Massey, a 36-year-old mother, was tragically shot by a Sangamon County sheriff deputy on July 6th. Recently released body cam footage has intensified the calls for justice, leading to charges of first-degree murder against Deputy Sean Grayson. Protests continue to demand transparency and accountability.
Raise your fists together. I am somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody.
Red and yellow, brown, black, and white. We're all precious in God's sight. Everybody is somebody. Stop the violence. Save the children. Stop bullying. Save the children.
Hold your head high. Stick your chest out. You can make it. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive.
Having introduced these important topics, let's start with the Supreme Court and President Biden's proposal to revamp the Supreme Court.
We've had term limits for presidents of the United States for nearly 75 years after the Truman administration. And I believe we should have term limits for Supreme Court justices of the United States as well. In fact, the United States is the only major constitutional democracy that gives lifetime seats in their high court. Term limits would help ensure that the court membership changes with some regularity. That would make timing for the court's nomination more predictable and less arbitrary. Reduce the chance that any single presidency imposes undue influence in generations to come. The bipartisan commission I convened analyzed various term limit structures. Based on their report, I believe the best structure is the 18-year term limit. That would help ensure the country would not have what it has now: an extreme court that's proud of an attack on the confirmation process that's been weaponized by those seeking to carry out an extreme agenda for decades to come.
Some people are saying that this revision is just one because he's upset about maybe some of the political dynamics that are going on currently. Tio, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I totally agree with President Biden when it comes down to term limits, because the reality is some people, when they're in office too long, they become complacent. A lot of times they may find themselves out of touch with what's going on in the United States right now. So some of their decisions may be a little bit more off base when it comes down to making appropriate decisions, even Supreme Court members, as far as I'm concerned. So I definitely back Biden.
Sure, but Attorney Rice, you know, the reason why there are no term limits currently on the Supreme Court is so that these individuals are not biased by political influence. What are your thoughts there on President Biden's proposal?
I definitely support his proposal. And as T.O. has mentioned, we don't want a Supreme Court that is out of touch with the public pulse. I definitely believe that term limits on Supreme Court justices would keep a fresh set of eyes, a fresh set of justices who ultimately, after nomination to the Supreme Court, have been in the trenches. They've been ruling on decisions. They've been in our federal court system, and they understand that the issues that Americans are facing when they come to the court seeking justice. The institution of term limits with any current justices and even new justices to join the Supreme Court would keep that pulse current, would keep an eye to what Americans face, and ultimately influence the American ability to respect and appreciate the decisions that are made from our Supreme Court justices.
Where President Biden is proposing at this moment is 18 years. That at a minimum would be 2.5 presidencies if you have a president that serves two terms, and then half of another one. Is 18 years about the right going on? Should we also look at expanding the court? What do you think?
You're talking about 18 years for a person serving on the Supreme Court?
Yes.
Well, I think 18 years is pretty decent due to the fact, I'm not criticizing Biden right now, but Biden is an older guy now. We all may become older sooner or later, right? So look at what Biden's struggling with right now as the president. You know, he can't think too good, even though he's a solid individual. But the thing is, you don't want anybody on the Supreme Court that's going to make a real serious decision that's going to impact people here in the United States. And their mind is just not there sometimes. So I think 18 years is perfect.
Ultimately, I think any period of time, maybe even from 18 to 25, 18 to 30 years would be effective in that that's an entire generation. And when we look at the application of the law as it relates to the current goings-on in society, advances in technology, and ultimately the fact that our courts face cases now that absolutely weren't even imagined at the time that the Constitution itself was drafted, that a Supreme Court that changes from generation to generation would again keep that pulse on America and understand the applications of our legal system to the current happenings in our nation.
I think that all of this is extremely important. It's an important discussion. I know that the president has put this out here now for discussion with our U.S. Congress. The likelihood of something happening before he's out of office is minimal, but the conversation begins. Let's take a hard pivot now to a topic that is closer to home and one that affects not only us here individually, but us as a society collectively.
New details emerging from allegations of aggression and integrity issues involving Sean Grayson. He's the former Illinois Sheriff's deputy charged in the murder of Sonia Massey. She called 911 earlier this month to report a suspected prowler at her Springfield home. Body camera video shows Grayson responding and later shooting Massey as she held a pot of boiling water.
Going down? No, she had a boiling water and came at me with boiling water. You shot her? Yeah. She said she was going to rebuke me in the name of Jesus and came out with boiling water.
Grayson has held 6 different jobs in law enforcement since 2020. Sangamon County Sheriff Jack Campbell says his department failed Massey.
What are your thoughts on what's going on or what has gone on and what should go on?
Well, you know, on behalf of Violence Interrupters, you know, my staff, we rescued about 13 women from domestic violence situations over the last year. Now, back to Sonia Massey right now, that's my way of trying to pay it forward to women. The reality is that, just imagine calling Count Dracula, right, at 12 midnight to come help you. That's what happened to Sonia Massey. The officer that arrived at her home had no respect for her humanity. He looked at her right in the door. His mind was already made up that he was going to kill Sonia Massey. That's the way it played out as far as my point of view. And I have to be straight up and clear about that. I've seen a lot of police department officials speak out against what he did as well. He shouldn't have never been on the police force. This guy had all kinds of issues in his background. He was suspended from jobs. He was terminated from jobs. How did he end up on the Sangamon County Sheriff's Department in the first place? And once again, it's always this prototype of individual that goes out here and crosses the line to kill black people. I've seen many videos where white people have been, you know, like a police may approach a white person, but they give them grace. I saw a video where a white guy took the police officer's baton, right, and chased him down the street with it. They still did not open up fire on that particular individual. It happens time and time again, and some people get caught up because I don't want to always turn it into black or white, but the reality is always a white officer with the same type of prototype mindset that kills an unarmed black person, always here in the United States.
The first-degree murder charge is absolutely the correct charge to be charged in this case. Sonia Massey called the police. We ask for protection and service from our officers. She needed protection. She needed service. She's in her home. She was fully compliant with the officer. The video brought me to tears. Her level of compliance was absolutely what is expected when you are dealing with law enforcement officers. And as she attempted to comply, she looked for her ID. They noticed the boiling water on the stove. They told her to go turn it off. She got up from her seat to do as she was asked. She fully complied. And when the officer instructed her to stop moving with this boiling pot of water, if you watch this video, she immediately put her hands up. Immediately she put her hands up. And what do we know when the hands go up? That is stop, don't shoot. She asked this officer who was there to protect and to serve her to stop and don't shoot me. And she lost her life.
She actually said, "I'm sorry," as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we have these topics and many, many more topics that we're going to be discussing during the Rainbow Push Coalition's annual conference on August 15th through the 18th. Stay tuned with us and we'll be right back.
We're excited to get more people engaged and involved in Rainbow Push, supporting the programs of Push for Excellence and the Citizenship Education Fund. Now, if you're interested in public policy and you want to help change the policies that impact those who are incarcerated, you can do so. If you're interested in impacting public policies that benefit education and businesses with social economic solutions, you can do that as well. You can become a policymaker by becoming a member of Rainbow Push right now. Now, if you believe in the scholarships that we've given to thousands of students each year, you can help us out. We've awarded more than $10 million in scholarships year to date. Now, you can help young people achieve a higher education by becoming a member of Rainbow Push right now for the annual fee of only $35. And if you're a student or a senior, it's only $15. You can help us make a difference in the lives of millions. Now, if you watch us every week, or if you listen to us on the radio, or if you're viewing on social media, we need you to become a member. And how do you become a member? It's simple. Visit us at rainbowpush.org and press join. Maybe you'd like to support the work of Push. If so, it's really simple. You can do so by texting the word PUSH, that's P-U-S-H, to 41444 on your cell phone, and you can give any amount that you feel comfortable giving, or you can call us at 773-256-2775 or go to rainbowpush.org and push donate. So whenever you want to support, you can do it from anywhere. So keep pushing, because we're going to keep pushing for you and keep hope alive.
Welcome back. Today's program is designed to provoke thought, stimulate passionate debate, and to provide you with a clearer understanding of where each candidate stands on the issues that matter most to you and our community. We aim to highlight not just the policies, but the profound impact that they will have to our communities, to our families, and our future. You've already been introduced to our panelists, but let's get to know them just a little bit more as they're experts in their field as we dive into our first segment, criminal justice reform. Attorney Ashanta Rice.
Good morning again, Mr. Harris. My name again is Ashanta Rice. I am an attorney here in Chicago, where I've been practicing for the past 20 years. Personally, I'm a mother of two. I have an 11-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. I am a true and through Democrat. I bleed blue blood, and for those reasons, I am fully supportive of Vice President Kamala Harris in her candidacy for the President of the United States of America today.
Outstanding. T.O., Mr. Ceasefire Hardiman.
That's me, yeah. T.O. Hardiman, once again. I'm an author of a book titled Interrupting Gun Violence, The Public Health Approach. I also serve as an adjunct professor at North Park University in the field of restorative justice and criminal justice as well, and also working just to try to save lives here in Chicago. I'm the president of Violence Interrupters, not-for-profit organization.
Okay, let's jump into it. And I'm Clayton Harris III. I am excited to jump in here. Among other things, I'm also a lecturer at the University of Chicago, where I teach policing race in America, black, white, and blue. So criminal justice reform is not only near and dear to my heart and their hearts, but to all of ours, because this, the People's Agenda, Harris versus Trump, the battle for the nation, this first segment tackles one of the most pressing issues of our time, criminal justice reform. Vice President Harris's campaign champions comprehensive changes aimed at dismantling systemic racism, ending private prisons, and reforming policing practices. On the other hand, former President Trump advocates for strong law and order approach, emphasizing support for law enforcement and mandatory sentencing. So let's jump into this. How do the differing approaches to criminal justice reform affect the minority community?
Former President Trump, he has what you might call a heavy hand when it comes to criminal justice. His thing is support the police all the way, no matter what the police may do at any given time. Kamala Harris, she's a former, prosecutor, right, from Attorney General in the state of California. Her take, there's a lot of issues with her in her background. Apparently, when it comes down to criminal justice, a lot of people have been speaking out against her. I'm not against her, I want to make that clear, but people have been speaking out against her based on the fact that she allegedly, a lot of people were locked up because of the Get Tough on Crime bills back during the President Clinton era and all that kind of stuff there. But the reality is that there needs to be a balance, right? Because there's a preponderance of evidence that African-American people have been caught up in the criminal justice system for decades, far too long. It's called the prison industrial complex. When you have high levels of poverty, high levels of trauma, high levels of mental health, high levels of families in the African-American community without the fathers at home, you have people that end up in the criminal justice system. And then you have a serious issue with people with mental health issues. So when you talk about reform, you have to tackle all those different categories of issues if you want to make it right for just common people. So Trump wants to give immunity, for example, to all police officers across the United States. I think that's the wrong direction to go in, because there's a lot of evidence that a lot of police have crossed the line over the years here, over the decades, actually.
So, Tio, I hear you, and you're saying some of the same things policy-wise that Vice President Harris has, or former President Trump, on strong police reform or whatnot, is what gives her a pass, the fact that she's a black woman? What do you think, Attorney Rice?
Well, I think that Tio is definitely onto a number of things, and he understands that to reform our criminal justice system, right? What officers expect to do at work and have immunity from, or be challenged in their decision making, but then also the right of each and every citizen to have the advantages that this nation has promised, so that our boys are not going into the prison industrial complex.
For sure. Sure, but the question is, does former President Trump's stance on law and order improve public safety or exacerbate tensions between our communities and law enforcement? Don't we deserve to have a safe neighborhood?
For sure. President Trump, a lot of his rhetoric, I don't think it improves relationships, especially in the African-American community. What I see happening is that Trump is pretty much aggravating the situation to a degree, because of the failed war on drugs, for example. We have a whole lot of African-American young people, Hispanic people, locked up in penitentiaries for the rest of their lives. One of the best things that ever came out of criminal justice reform was commuting sentences for people that used to sell marijuana, especially here in the state of Illinois, but across our nation as well. So a lot of work still has to be done, because what you're going to do when them young people are released from prison? Do they have an opportunity to redeem themselves in the restorative justice arena? So being tough on crime is one thing, but you cannot arrest your way out of an epidemic. We have to provide opportunities for young people throughout this nation where they can become a productive member of society. And I think we failed, and let me just give you some facts about that. Looking at Chicago, yes.
With the facts, when you talk about the failed war on drugs, right? We know that the war on drugs was perpetrated on minority communities from a presidential administration, right? We're talking about the Nixon administration. It came out that they lied about everything that was going on, right? So now when we look at some of the things that, even starting with President Clinton, when we go to President Obama, and now some of the things that President Biden has done, to combat that. You're talking about people now who were incarcerated because of drug offenses, and now they're coming back, and that'll lead us into our next segment on education. But coming back, we look at the Cook County State's Attorney, Kim Foxx, and some of the things that they are doing there. How does this reform still keep us, especially in our communities, safe?
County was the #1 county for wrongful convictions. Kim Foxx single-handedly really turned that whole system around here in Cook County, so I would like to respect her for that. But at the same time, I want to take a look at the fact that people really need to hear this. You have a lot of young people out here that continue to cross the line. We cannot be too soft on crime. You have people being carjacked, people being kidnapped, people being robbed all over the place throughout the United States, Baltimore, Memphis, St. Louis, Chicago, Detroit. So the thing is, we cannot just continue to just slap somebody on the wrist and let them right back out. Sure. People have to pay for their crimes, so we definitely need a balance. That's what I'm talking about, Attorney Rice.
So then that leads me to my last question. I want to address this to you. Can Vice President Harris's proposals effectively address systemic issues, or do they risk increasing crime rates?
So I think that, well, the answer to your question is absolutely no. Policy issues affect the way that we do things. So this is the way crime is investigated in our nation. This is the way crime will be punished in our nation. However, we've always had a criminal justice system. The criminal justice system itself is not a deterrent to those bad actors in our society that are then committing crimes. So yes, we do need to keep our community safe. And we do need to have a justice policy that does not make the American people complete adversaries of our government, our municipal structures, and our police department. But we do, in fact, need an overhaul so that there is not a continued distrust of our criminal justice system by everyone in our communities.
Oh, that was perfect.
So as a professor of public policy, you mentioned policies and the policies that we're doing. I asked about being able to address the systemic issues, or do they risk increasing crime rates? Can we do more than one thing at a time?
What I said was, you cannot arrest your way out of an epidemic. We have to deal with a lot of the root causes of the crime in our nation right now. And just putting a Band-Aid on it, it's not going to work. It hasn't been proven to work. There's no data, empirical evidence that it works anyway. The reality is that you have so many people being released from prison, there's no rehabilitation to a degree in prison. When you go to the state penitentiary across the United States, you're in maximum security, 23-hour lockdown. Then you go to medium after you've been there for some years. Now you're in lockdown for 18 hours. Then hopefully you get to minimum after you serve 20 or 25 years. Then you might have a few programs there. But a lot of people are released without any type of skill sets when they come back out of prison. That's why I'm pushing restorative justice all the way. So I do know there's about 5 or 10% of young men that need to be locked up, though. I'm just being straight up with you. You have some people out there, they just will not change no matter how you try to work with them. I do a lot of volunteer work in the Cook County Jail right now. A young guy told me, about 21 years old, he told me this, Attorney Rice. He said, you can give us a job, and our job is to just go to sleep, and we'll wake up out our sleep and quit the job. So we have to find a way to hire a lot of these young men where it will stay with them for the rest of their lives.
So that being said, I think that this is going to be the perfect segue into our next segment, where we're going to be talking about education. So when we look at criminal justice reform, maybe we are looking at new court systems as well as the way that it comes out. But I think education is going to be what swings us into our next segment. So please stay tuned with us, and we'll be right back.
What we are fighting is that's in the fabric of the country that we've got to change. Now, we've done a lot to change it.
Push Excel strives to be a world leader in promoting educational excellence and equity so that every child is guaranteed an opportunity to receive a quality education. We've awarded more than $10 million in scholarships year to date. And you can help young people achieve a higher education by donating to Push Excel right now. Wherever you are, you can support our students as we keep pushing for you.
Welcome back. We are going to focus our next segment on education. We know that this presidential race is going to surround itself around educational policies of both candidates. Education is the cornerstone of our society and a key focus of the 2024 presidential race. In this segment, we explore the educational policies of Vice President Harris and former President Trump. Vice President Harris's agenda includes increased federal funding for public schools, universal pre-K, and debt-free community college, aimed at reducing inequality and boosting opportunities for all. Contrastingly, former President Trump promotes school choice, vouchers, and charter schools, advocating for a reduced federal involvement in education. So here we are, and we're going to start, and we're going to just dive right on in. So are Vice President Harris's educational policies financially stable, sustainable, and how will they impact taxpayers?
Well, when you think about it, when it comes to Vice President Kamala Harris, her policies with education, see, first and foremost, the way I see it, especially in the African-American community, right? And the reason I speak about the African-American community is because the levels of educational scores in math and reading are very low in cities like Baltimore, Chicago, Memphis, St. Louis, and cities throughout the United States. We have to really solve the issue of gun violence in our communities because a lot of young people cannot concentrate when they go to school. So Kamala Harris is talking about more federal funding, which is a good thing, right? And then making sure you don't have to pay to go to City College. I'm a product of City Colleges myself. I attended Harold-Watson College back in the days, and I had to go back to obtain my bachelor's degree at Northeastern University, then my master's degree. So the reality is that education is very important, but a lot of young people, they don't know how to pursue the educational system, especially if they have levels of, and some people are illiterate, right? Not to condemn people, but you have a lot of high levels of illiteracy in all communities, especially in the African-American community. That's why you see so many young people going to prison. So I believe as educators in the leadership in the educational system, some of us have failed these young people out here throughout the United States.
Sure. You're a mom. What do you think?
So even to your point, Tio, it definitely starts with the education in the community. So it's my understanding that one of Vice President Harris's goals would be to implement universal pre-K programs. So we have students who can later score higher in math and reading because they started in preschool. They started with sight words. They started with phonics. Is there money enough in our budget to do that? Absolutely. Ultimately, I mean, we all pay enough taxes. Right? Sure. We all worry about what our bill is going to look like on April 15th and whether or not I'm writing a check, not quite often receiving a refund, right? And the taxes that we pay just in our city to support our local government programs. So the money is absolutely there. The money just needs to be appropriated into the right direction.
So you talk about appropriating the money correctly. So when we talk about statistics and when we're talking about universal pre-K, right? When we're talking about free community college for everyone, people talk about paying someone else's way to go and that's going to increase my taxes. But the facts of the matter truly are that it costs $42,000 to $45,000 a year to incarcerate someone, whereas community college costs between $9,000 and $20,000 per year to educate someone. So in this capitalistic society, doesn't it make more sense to spend less money to educate people? And then when we talk about educated people, the prison population of educated people is less than 1/8. 1/8 of the people incarcerated are educated at that point in time.
There's no reason, I'm sorry to cut you off, but there's no reason that if we can institute a statewide or even nationwide funding for community colleges, that we're also not assisting then those middle-class parents make sure that their students can financially attend those four-year universities to get the bachelor's degree.
This brings up a question, you know, if we turn this now into public school, right, from kindergarten through at least your associate's degree, right, does former President Trump's, does his policies that focus on school choice undermine public education, or does it provide necessary alternatives for underprivileged individuals?
America's schools are currently segregated. Correct. Chicago public schools are currently segregated. Our suburban school districts are absolutely segregated. Minority students continually go to underfunded and overpopulated high schools. So with any voucher choice program in private education, it is only a new framework to continue to have segregated schools.
The quality of education needs to be the same across the board in the United States. Some of the schools in the poor communities should be at the same level of teacher involvement, student involvement, all the different programs that we talk about. Those type of programs should take place in schools, even in poor communities, all across the United States.
So isn't that what is causing the achievement gap and the educational inequality in our schools right there? And if so, then how do each one of these, or how do the policies of Vice President Harris or former President Trump address that? Or how can they, or should they?
So there's still the part of achievement in education that is based upon the parent and home commitment to the student.
Sure, but so to this point, if I can afford to send my kid to a school, and I'm a father, I have 2 children too. I have an 11 and 9-year-old. And I know that this public school is underperforming, but I can afford to send them. Isn't that what President Trump is saying that I should be able to do, is to send my child somewhere else and maybe get credit there as with a voucher? Why would that be wrong if I want to educate
That's
my
why
child?
I just supported that process what Donald Trump is talking about. I definitely agree to send my child somewhere else if the schools are performing much better than the schools in my neighborhood.
Sure, but to Ashanta's point right there, now we focus on a more segregated society, right? How do we continue to move as a society if blacks are over here, Latinos are over here, Asians are here, and whites are here, and that the balance is tilted this way, right? So I'm down and low because I'm black and I'm impoverished, and I can't afford to send my kids to this school over here. I want to, but I can't. So what do? How do we address this? Pre-K, I get that universal pre-K is a start.
And I believe that all kids, all young people should be raised up around different nationalities. I do believe that we shouldn't have segregated schools. You know, they fought against segregation, you know, many, many decades ago during the civil rights era. But at the same time, we're missing the point when it comes down to the fact that we have so many levels, high levels of trauma in the African American community. I know that a president has to serve the entire nation. You have black people, you know, Caucasian people, Asian, Hispanic people, but no other people is struggling like African American people. The data backs up what I'm talking about. So for starters, we have to find a way to really get in there and help our young people before they even get to the school level. Because a lot of times people grow up in dysfunctional families, the failed war on drugs, once again, people do not want to take that into consideration. How could a kid concentrate when he has a multitude of issues at home?
So I think what we're looking at truly is a poverty level, and one of resources and finances. And I think that will really dovetail us into our next segment dealing with employment. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
We're excited to get more people involved in Rainbow Push, supporting the programs of Push for Excellence and the Citizenship Education Fund. If you're interested in impacting public policies, if you believe in the scholarships that we give to thousands of students each and every year, you can become a policymaker by becoming a member of Rainbow Push right now. For an annual membership of $35, or if you're a student or senior, $15, you can help us make a difference in the lives of millions. How do you become a member? Visit our website at rainbowpush.org and press join. Or maybe you'd like to support us. You can text the word PUSH, that's P-U-S-H, to 41444 on your cell phone, and you can give any amount you feel comfortable giving. You can also call us at 773-256-2775, or go to rainbowpush.org and push donate. Wherever you are, you can support us as we keep pushing for you.
Welcome back, family. As we move into our next segment, I know there were a couple points that we wanted to address. Attorney Ashanta Rice pulled me aside during the break to talk about, after I mentioned the incarceration. To incarcerate someone annually is about $42,000 to $45,000 per year, but to educate someone in community college is between $9,000 and $20,000 a year. And I asked why, you know, if we're in this capitalistic society, why haven't we changed? And you had a point that you wanted to make on maybe why we haven't changed.
Right. Well, it's just, it angers me and it upsets me. And I'm sure Tio knows the stats on this, but if it costs essentially 1/4 of the dollar value to educate someone to an associate's degree level within 2 years of what it would cost to incarcerate someone for 2 years, who's really making the money? Why are these private prisons who are owned by these unseen faces who generally have billions of dollars to pour into their interests, their special interest groups? Why are we not standing up and saying, rather than incarcerate people, we need to educate people? Because everyone knows on the back end there's someone making money. And what do we say? If you follow the money. Why are things like this in America? Because we're going to follow the money. And when you follow the money and you find these hidden faces that can fund special interest agendas, for lack of a better word, that's where we need to be.
So is it in America's best interest as we move now, because this might be the perfect segue, right? As we move from education to employment, are you saying or suggesting that maybe it's in their best interest to keep a certain population impoverished and ignorant, right? Because if you have an intelligent, right, and a better educated society, specifically speaking with black folks, aren't we talking about now a segment that can demand higher employment, right? And we start talking about this right now and what we're talking about in this election in 2024, we look at American workforce being at the heart of the nation's prosperity, right? In this segment, we're going to focus on employment and economic strategies and all that stuff proposed by Vice President Harris and former President Trump. But when we look at Vice President Harris, she's calling for raising of the federal minimum wage, right? If I'm an educated person, I can demand a higher wage, correct? Correct? Correct, right? Expanding labor rights and investing in green jobs and infrastructure. Green jobs in and of itself, when we talk about the environmental justice, again, we're talking about impoverished communities. And people try to segregate these out. Well, we're talking about impoverished and not black communities, but they're one and the same if we're uneducated, right? If we're uneducated, then we're unemployed or underemployed. And then you start sprinkling in the immigration issue, right? And that immigrants are coming in from all around the world into the United States and they're taking away black jobs. Well, first and foremost, what's a black job? Right? Come on, let's talk about that. And then let's talk about what it looks like to have an educated society versus what it is with an uneducated society. Because all of these segments, come on, people, this is not by accident. All of these segments build upon one another. Employment builds upon education. Criminal justice reform builds upon education and employment. Employment builds upon criminal justice and education. These are all brought in together. And we have two different individuals that approach it differently. And that is why this, and we'll get into voter registration and everything else like that, but why this election is so important, not only to our generation. Here we are sitting here, and I'll say I'm a little bit older. I got these gray hairs. She says she's been an attorney for 20 years, so she started when she was 4, so that's great or whatnot. But to our younger generation, right? My kids, I also have, as I said, a 9 and 11-year-old, and what's going on, and to your children and the individuals around that. So talk to me about what we're talking about with employment. We still talk about education and criminal justice reform, but we're focusing on now employment and what it looks like between the Harris campaign and the Trump agenda and the Trump campaign.
Well, you know, Trump talked about making America great again, right? So if he wants to make America great again, it starts with educating people all across the board, right?
Sure.
And then also I want to say,
fast. I want you to
go
keep
ahead.
on. I don't know when America was great to begin with. We talk about immigration.
Yeah.
I want to make it clear to everyone, my people were not immigrants. Okay, continue though.
For sure.
Right.
I thank you for bringing it up. My people were not immigrants as well, right? We were forced over here.
Correct.
That's another long story, but making America great again, from my perception, would be making sure people are educated from the ground level up. All races, all cultures are educated out here. And we also need to bring industry back to the neighborhood. Like in Detroit, the car industry used to hire about 80% of the people in Detroit. The car industry is not as lucrative as it used to be, so a lot of people are unemployed in Detroit. And across the nation, I know a lot of people say, well, T.O.'s always talking about black issues. I have to talk about black issues, right? Because my people are struggling the most out here. We're talking about high unemployment rates like in Chicago right now. 85% of young black men men between the ages of, let's say, 16 to, let's say, 24 are unemployed in Chicago right now. So how can we fix that? So there needs to be jobs. If I was Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, I would actually meet with some of these companies and have them to open up their companies right in the heart of the inner city and have people go to work there. Now, if you don't want to go to work, that's up to you, but I would provide the opportunities for you, and that's where education comes in as well, because people need a resume. People need to know how it is to go, conduct themselves during an interview and all those kind of good things. But on a wide-scale level, that's what's needed right now, in my opinion. More industries coming. See, we're living in a technological age now. It used to be the industrial age, right? There's a book written by a guy, Tauber, his last name is titled, what was it titled? Something about the industrial complex or whatever the case. All those industrial jobs would come to an end, and now we're dealing with high technology jobs. So what do young people want to do now? We have to find a way to integrate them in the technology world, in other words.
Sure. And we go back to community college and being provided an education so that you can figure out what you want to do.
Even to bring companies to our community. We need to bring companies to our community with accountability, because companies can come into inner city Chicago, anywhere in the community, and then decide that it makes more sense economically to hire someone who is an undocumented worker and possibly even pay less than their fare, who may not know what unionized labor is, and all the things that as American citizens we've learned over the years as to the best way to work in those manufacturing jobs, but ultimately they will become technology jobs. But to think about it and to know that we should be paid a fair wage, we should be paid a living wage, and on top of that living wage, there are certain standards for our work environment. An undocumented worker may not know these things, but the corporations need to be held accountable for hiring anyone.
There you go. And maybe that should be the policy shift. Instead of persecuting these individuals who are trying to make a living and provide for their family, maybe we should be prosecuting the companies and corporations that are hiring these people under the board, that are exploiting these people's wants, needs, and their desire just to provide for their family. When we talk about minimum wages, when we talk about deregulating job growth and stimulating, these are the things that, again, at least in my opinion, go back to an educated populace, so that we're dealing with so that we're decreasing an impoverished a community, which in turn, as we talked about the stats, would reduce the incarcerated communities as well. I know we didn't stick to just one topic in this segment right here, but we're glad you're here. We're glad that we're engaging in this conversation, this lively conversation, and we want to remind you that these are the topics that we're going to be talking about during our annual conference on August 15th, from August 15th to 18th. This conference will dovetail us, will actually just swing us into the Democratic National Convention that's going to be here. And as we come out of our conference, we are going to have an agenda to present to the DNC. And the same agenda is something that we should present to the RNC too, to make sure that they're hearing what's on your mind and what you're passionate about, as well as what we're discussing here. We'll be right back.
In the early morning hours of July 6th in Springfield, Sonia Massey had called 911 from her apartment for help, the 36-year-old reporting a suspected prowler outside. Sangamon County Deputy Sean Grayson and his partner responded to the call. Body cam video shows the officers entering her apartment asking for her ID. Then Deputy Grayson asked her to take a pot of hot water off the stove and set it down. Massey did so, then ducked, apologizing. Seconds before Grayson then fires 3 rounds at her, hitting her in the face. Illinois State Police investigated, and then in the days that followed, the Sangamon County State's attorney charged Deputy Grayson with first-degree murder, aggravated battery with a firearm, and official misconduct. He has also been fired from the sheriff's office.
I showed up at the scene first. Her mom called me, and I don't know how I drove there, but I drove there and made it there. And there's so much of a cover-up from when one law enforcement agency lied to the next agency to tell them that she did this to herself.
My mother, she's everything to me. I love her, like, with my whole heart. Like, I can't believe none of this is going on right now. But she means everything to me.
But it's not about getting some press. I got my own show. I don't need to be somewhere for press. But this could be my daughter.
Amen.
This could be my son.
Amen.
This could be my mother. And unless we all take that to heart, it will keep happening.
Welcome back, everybody. We have been joined by a very, very special guest. Reverend Al Sharpton has joined us to engage in this dialogue, this conversation that we're going on. Our fourth segment was to introduce voter registration and how voter registration was building upon employment, education, and criminal justice reform. But you know, we started this whole conversation this morning dealing with President Biden talking about the Supreme Court, but a case that we were dealing with in Springfield, Illinois, and that was the Sonya Massey case. So why don't we start there and let the Reverend Al come in and to bring and lend his perspective to this conversation. Reverend Al?
I think that Sonya Massey's case shows us, again, the continued brutality law enforcement has. But in a deeper meaning, had we been able to get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed, he would not, he being the murderer, the one that killed her and has been charged with that, would not have been able to work in 6 different law enforcement jurisdictions in 4 years, because that would have been banned by federal law. Yes, now, to his credit, President Biden signed an executive order, but that only is for as good as federal government. It has nothing to do with state law enforcement, city or municipal law enforcement. That's why, tying into what y'all were talking about, you got to register to vote. If we put the right people in office, we'd have had that bill. Why didn't we have that bill? The Republicans blocked it in the Senate, right. And we did not have, we had 2 Democrats that wouldn't go with it. So Biden went ahead and did the executive order, but it was not law. And that's one of the things that needs to be front and center in this election. You can't talk about everything from George Floyd to Massey and not talk about voting on who is the prosecutors, who's the DA, and what is going to be the laws they operate under.
Happy to see you reinforce the message of voting, because the reality is Trump is pushing for immunity for police officers from prosecution. Right. And you look at what just happened to Sonya Massey, and when she said, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus," it appears as if she witnessed the devil come into her house, Reverend Al Sharpton, right? So we have to continue to fight, because there appears to be the same prototype type of white police officer going in black people's homes or in the community killing black people all the time. 9 times out of 10, it's a white officer killing somebody black that's not armed, in other words, right? So we have to continue to just keep our voices out there when it comes to Sonya Massey and all the other African-American people that have been killed by some of these rogue police officers.
Now, you raised something very important, qualified immunity. Which we had in the George Floyd bill, because my whole thing is, I did the marches on George Floyd, I preached all of his funerals, was that if we don't come out of this with legislation, we're just going to have more frustration. And in it with qualified immunity, because a policeman will act different if we take the qualified immunity away. Sure. Because his wife will tell him in the morning, "Now you behave yourself, because we could lose a house if you do something wrong, lose the car." Right now, the counties pay for that. That's why it doesn't make sense. I'm not from Chicago. We have affiliates here with Marshall Hatch and them. Sure. But to not go from Kim Foxx to him is to break continuity. This ain't about whether you like him or Kim. This is about, do you want to have people there that will hold the criminal and the police accountable, from blue jeans to blue uniform.
This is why you have got to get out there to vote. When people talk about our voting and our ability to vote being under fire and being, you know, they talk about the Civil Rights Act of 1964, right? 1965. But I remind people that that wasn't the first one. At a minimum, that was the second one, because we had one in 1865 to deal with this. When we look at what's going on and why it's so important for you to register to vote and then for you to go out and vote, it is also important for you to be educated about who you're going to vote for, why you're going to vote for. Reverend Al just talked about different things that people want. It cannot be just compartmentalized, and I'm only going to vote for this individual if they're 100% on what I want. We have to stop having or making people take purity tests and start looking at what's in our best interest collectively. Yes, individually, I want to vote my heart and my passion, but what is good for my community? What's good for my children? What's good for my church? What's good for my people? But not just my community, but our community as a whole. How do we educate people and say, yes, maybe this candidate won't do everything you want, but this candidate, we're in a unique position, right now. We have someone who's running for president, and he has a record. So we know how he is for and with black people. We know how he is with and for minority communities, yet we have individuals and minorities and minority communities that are just like, well, I'm not going to vote.
This is the prosecutor versus the felon.
That's right.
I mean, can you believe that? It wouldn't even be conceivable if he was black.
Oh, please. Zero chance, zero.
I tell everybody that asks me the quick thing of, because I fought Trump, marched on him, and known him. They said, well, how would you know Donald Trump? You know him. I said, if Donald Trump had been born black, he'd have been Don King. That's who Donald Trump is. Yusef Jackson told me that line.
We are discussing the people's agenda, Harris versus Trump, the battle for our nation. These conversations, these topics are things that we're going to bring up at the annual Rainbow Push Coalition, the forum that's going to be held here at Operation Push from August 15th through August 18th. As we put together our agenda and our policy positions, we are going to be dovetailing right into the Democratic National Convention, also here in Chicago. We need for people to be engaged. We need for people to be informed. We need for more Reverend Al Sharpton to be heard everywhere. And we need for folks to show up. And let me take a thing from the young people. When we show up, we show out. We need people to show out. It is okay not to agree with anything or everything that we're saying here, but you have to show up. When we talk about voter registration, you talked about employing individuals in a different scale, but someone who's not employable, right? Because of previous incarceration. How do we look at the difference between these two candidates and how they approach employment?
I think that you've got to deal with a candidate that believes in giving people a second chance, who did it when she was the district attorney in San Francisco, who did it when she was attorney general, state of California. And some that call for the death penalty and people that ended up being innocent. I think that you've got to deal with the fact, and I'm glad you mentioned the convention. Again, the continuity that she raised. 64, Fannie Lou Hamer, Mississippi Freedom Party, Atlantic City trying to get in. At 68, convention in Chicago, ended up with a whole lot of drama around the Vietnam War. 72, Reverend Jackson and an alderman here, Bill Springer, unseated the daily delegation. 84, Jackson runs for president. So from 84 now to 24, where's the continuity? Out of 84, we went to 88, on to what we did in 04, on to Barack in 08, on to 12, on and on and on. So if we are going to be in tune with our own interests, we come into the Rainbow Push Convention before we go downtown. Coming into Chicago, asking, did you get your credentials downtown? And you didn't check in where our town is or what the agenda will be. Then you just going downtown as a spectator, not as somebody that is part of a convention about interests. So all of us are going to be at the Rainbow Push Convention. I don't care if you said, don't give me a ticket, I'm coming.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And this is the difference between going down to the convention and having popcorn or having a bullhorn. We need you to have a bullhorn so that your voice can be heard. We talk about employment, but then let's talk about education. What's the difference between these two candidates as we talk about education and how they approach education? And even before we skip over there, some of the flack that has been given to our sister, the Vice President Kamala Harris, is that she was too tough on crime, right? That as a district attorney there in California and then the attorney general, but then you juxtapose that against former President Trump, who's calling for harsher penalties and ignoring that. Again, we're talking about a purity test.
No, you're absolutely right. He wants to toughen up the laws that she helped balance. And of course, she's going to enforce the law because many of the crimes are committed against us. I mean, to criminalize us. Donald Trump said that we related to him because of his mugshot, which is the criminalizing of us, saying that we're all thugs and criminals. And now he's a convict, but he wants these stricter laws. She wanted balance, and that's why she went to an HBCU Howard. She comes out of us, so there's no comparison in it if we sit and listen to people like y'all that will say this is what it is rather than we going by hashtags. The people that he's raised in the black community to speak for him are not examples of thoughtful people. It'd be insulting. They would not take somebody out of country and western bar and tell them they're the political leaders of white America. How you gonna do that to us? We ought to have an insult level.
And plus, you know, the Democrats served Donald Trump with a heavyweight blow when they put Ms. Harris in the race. I must admit, I want to thank President Biden for passing the torch. Right. And I say this because the reality, Donald Trump was not prepared. Right. He cannot even really debate with Kamala Harris, in my opinion. No. What is he going to say to her? She's very articulate. She has a plan. She's been around. Donald Trump, I believe, you know, there was a picture. No, God forbid somebody attempted to assassinate him. Now, I don't like that fact, I must say. But the reality, the way they carried him off that stage, when he loses this election, they're going to carry him off that stage the same way.
Well, he is now, is like a boxer. He's trained for one fight, and now they've substituted the fight.
That's what I'm talking about.
And he has no skills for Kamala Harris. His whole thing on Biden was old, who was only 3 years older than him. Yep. Now he's running against somebody 20 years younger than him. So he and you can tell he can't get his footing. He don't know how to deal with her.
That's what I'm talking about.
And then he has this guy who is absolutely somewhere in outer space politically, J.D. Vance, who don't know what he's saying. Talk about childless women and I mean, what does that got to do being vice president? You gonna put a guy like this a heartbeat away from being president? It should make everybody scared.
For sure.
As a Howard Law grad, I appreciate what she's been doing, how she's been doing it, and what she's going to do. As we wrap up this final segment here, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I want to encourage everyone to join us for the convention again on August 15th through the 18th here at Operation Push. We are going to continue to move our agenda forward. We appreciate you coming out today. I want to thank T.O. Mr. Ceasefire Hardeman. I want to thank Attorney Ashanta Rice for coming in and speaking. And I want us all to thank the Reverend Al Sharpton for spending some time with us here this morning when you're watching this to talk about the issues that are not just important to us, but that are truly going to the fabric of our nation. So as we close, I would truly like to turn it over to Reverend Al to say thank you.
Again, I thank you, and I thank the panel, and I thank what's going on, and I'm glad to do this at home. I grew up in Breadbasket before it was Push and then in Push. So I'm home and spend more time on this stage than probably anyone other than my own in New York. And I think that for us to come to the landmark, the Bible talks about remove not the ancient landmark. This is a landmark of our struggle. And for us to come here as we prepare to nominate the first black woman for president is appropriate. In 1972, I was youth director of a black woman's campaign for president, Shirley Chisholm. And Shirley Chisholm was my congresswoman, I was her youth director. And Shirley Chisholm would be smiling, but she'd be frowning if you go downtown before you come by East 50th Street to the Rainbow Push Convention, because otherwise we wouldn't have got downtown. Kamala didn't get on that stage out of nowhere, neither did Barack. It all came out of what preceded them. And you got to go to the landmark to find out if you're lost or if you're found.
Yes, sir. The People's Agenda, Harris versus Trump, Battle for a Nation. Thank you for joining in.
Get involved with the movement.
Somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody.
Join the movement.
If you're not a member, become a member.
I am somebody. Fighting the most important battles for freedom and justice for all.
You made us change. Oh, trying to bring closer.
Join Rainbow Push.
But you're not pushing me away.
Join the movement. Join